Hi, it's John. Welcome to my channel, EV Intuition, where I help you understand about electric vehicles. Last weekend was the 1-year anniversary of my owning the Tesla Model Y. And I've been kind of keeping track of the expenses that I've been paying in regards to charging and etc. for that vehicle. And when I went over the figures this past week, I was amazed to find that I had saved over $2,000 using that vehicle. So let me share with you those details. Let's get started. Before I begin, I want to remind you that if you like the content of my videos, please subscribe and give me a like. If you have any comments, please share them also. This week I'm talking about the 1-year anniversary of my owning the Tesla Model Y and how much savings I had. As I mentioned, I was amazed that I had saved over $2,000. Really where it came down to was the cost of charging this vehicle versus the cost of fueling a car. And what I used as a comparison is that my other vehicle that I have in my household is a Toyota Rav4. It's a 2011, but it's a comparable sized vehicle compared to the Model Y. It's a small SUV or small to medium sized SUV, and they're roughly about the same size. So I thought that might be a good comparison. And if I didn't have my Model Y and I drove that Toyota Rav4 to all the places I took, then I would know how much I would spend to fill that vehicle with gas. And so that's what it really came down to. So let's look at the stats. This past year, I drove over 17,000 miles, which is a lot for us. And the reason why I drive a lot or put a lot of mileage on it is between the two vehicles is we have this rule in our household that if my wife and I are going somewhere together, we take the Tesla Model Y. And if we're both going to different places at the same time, the one who's going further goes with the Tesla Model Y. And the reason we do that is we know that the Tesla Model Y gets better efficiency as far as costs go in using that vehicle versus the RAV4. So that's what we've done, and we've used a lot more mileage on that Tesla compared to our RAV4. And so we put over 17,000 miles, and in that we had charged it with over 5,500 kilowatt hours of energy. If we did the math, the overall outcome was that we saved over $2,000 in the cost of that electricity used to charge that vehicle compared to if we had to fill up the gas tank of the RAV4 for all those miles. And now here's the big breakdown. I know this is a lot of data, but it's just showing you the month by month and how I broke up the charger types. So let's get more specific into that. I broke the charging up into 4 different areas: home charging, public charging that was free, public charging that was fee-based, cost me a little bit, and DC fast charging or supercharging in the case of the Tesla. For my particular use of the Tesla Model Y this past year, you can see in this pie chart the amount of each category of how I charged the vehicle. And you can see that the bulk of it was home charging, but it was also closely followed by public charging that is free. Between those two, that was 75% of the total charging that I did as far as the number of kilowatts. And the other 2 categories were public fee-based charging and supercharging. So that made up the bulk of the charging of that Model Y for this past year. Now let me get into the specifics of those categories of charging, because you may look at that and say, wow, how do you save that much in those different categories? So let's take a look at each of them individually, and you'll get a better picture of where my savings came from. First of all, my biggest savings probably comes from the fact that I live in an area where the electric rates are very inexpensive. I live in an area in upstate New York that has a municipal electric company. Basically, the utility doesn't make a profit. They basically pass the cost rate along to the customer and don't add any additional to it. And the nice thing about being in, I guess, upstate New York where we are is that basically the majority of that power is hydropower, clean power. So that's a very unique aspect of it. And I show you a lot of people say, well, wow, 6 cents per kilowatt hour. That's amazing because the US average is 17 cents. So I know I live in an area where electricity is very cheap, which makes charging from home very inexpensive and makes for a great place to own an electric vehicle. And just to show you proof, I'm showing you my most recent electric bill, and you can see that there's two components to that electric bill. The base rate is 4 cents per kilowatt hour, and then there's a PPAC adjustment calculation because sometimes the electric company has to buy additional power from the grid, and they buy that at a higher rate. So that added an additional 2 cents for a total of 6 cents per kilowatt hour, which is still amazing as far as the cost of electricity. And then just to fill it out, like I say, I have a Tesla wall charger, which is running at 240 volts. I'm pulling 40 amps. So I get 9.6 kilowatts of power, which is plenty fast for me because I can easily charge fully overnight, and I rarely do. So, and I put that charger in my garage, and that's been a very handy thing to have. Now let's look at the next category, and that is public free charging. I'm also fortunate to live in an area that has a lot of free public chargers. In fact, around in our town, we have over 30 different chargers in probably about 7 different locations there where you can charge your vehicle. That makes it convenient because when I go to the gym to work out, or I go to the community center where I teach some classes like EV classes, or I go to restaurants in town, I just park my car at an EV charger and I'm there for an hour or two and I get a little bump up in charge. It doesn't fully charge my vehicle, but it saves me from having to charge at home. So that's a nice convenience. The other thing that I've made a habit of doing is whenever I stay at a hotel or an Airbnb, VRBO, when I'm on a road trip with the Tesla Model Y, is I look for places that offer charging as part of that. And that's been useful. Well, you're paying for the hotel room or you're paying for the Airbnb. It's nice to also get the ability to charge your vehicle too for the cost. I look for free locations, and then also the fact of the convenience that I can hook it up to the charger overnight, and that saves me from having to find a supercharger in that area. The other thing that I've made a habit of is that wherever I go sometimes with the vehicle, that if it's an area that I'm not familiar with, I look around. Is there a place near there that I can charge my vehicle while I'm at that particular location? And I've done that as a habit. And that's why 36% of the charging that I did this past year was public free charging. And you can't beat free as far as cost goes. So that's another area that I was able to do a lot of savings in. Now the third area was public fee charging. And on occasion there's chargers that are available to the public and there's fee-based. And like I said, I usually try to find the free ones, but there was one occasion where I was in Boston and I found a public charger that was fee-based. It was 20 cents per kilowatt hour. And the reason I use that is, well, that's the only one I could find, and that was certainly cheaper, usually about half the cost of a supercharger in that area. So for that weekend, I charged multiple times at that fee-based charger. And so that was included in my calculation. And the last area is DC fast charging. Clearly, when you go on a road trip, you're going to have to find fast chargers because you don't want to spend a lot of time charging and you want to move on. And I took advantage of Tesla's superchargers, and I really love the ability of the Tesla superchargers to just appear in my navigation system, and it takes me to ones that are have available chargers. And I seen once where it routed me around one particular site that was busy. All chargers were being used. So that's a wonderful thing that I didn't have to wait at all throughout all my trips. And I went as far west as Illinois, as far south as South Carolina, and as far east as Boston, Massachusetts. And yeah, I never had to wait to charge at a Tesla supercharger. Whereas when I owned my Ford Mach-E several years ago, there were times I showed up at the charger site and they're all being used. So that's a wonderful thing. But notice that the cost of charging at a supercharger is much more expensive. 32 cents to maybe 43 cents per kilowatt hour. So much more expensive compared to home charging. But you have to do it when you're on a trip. When you put all this together, it's amazing. $2,000 of savings compared to that. And I said, wow. And then Tesla also has a app. Within their app, they do charge stats. Now, the interesting thing about their charge stat, it goes by month. You can't split it. And I actually picked up my Tesla Model Y in the middle of May. The charts will not match totally, but you're looking at the charge stats from my Tesla app, and pretty much it modeled very closely. It was saying the gas savings was close to $2,000. Now, keep in mind, I think Tesla compares the savings to the average U.S. car, which maybe mine was a little below average because it was a older SUV, the Toyota Rav4. Some other stats that I then put together just to kind of get some sense of how significant this was. Now, I compared my savings to my other vehicle, which I said averages 23 miles per gallon. That's a combination of city and highway. But let's say I had a more efficient vehicle that got 30 miles per gallon. And what would be the savings there? And it would still be over $1,400. So even if you have a more efficient vehicle, I would have saved a lot of money using my Tesla Model Y. The other thing is, okay, a lot of people might look at it and say, wow, you were able to use a lot of free charging at these locations, especially around town. But what would happen if instead of not doing any public free charging, let's say I just charged at home for all those times? What would be the savings? And the savings would still be over $1,900, which still is amazing. And the last thing I said was, well, what happened if I didn't even have a home charger or use public charging, and I just used superchargers for all this, and I would still have saved over $450. In summary, I hope you learned that there could be significant savings for you in owning an electric vehicle compared to a gas vehicle. Now, clearly, your savings will vary depending where in the country you live. But I hope this video inspires you to look into that cost and see what you can save. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.